Terrific. Well, Allan Savory, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we're looking forward to having your input into what we're all looking at today, which is the regenerative agriculture, and ensuring that it's going to actually really take off and be a very significant part of agriculture in Australia, and the way in which we grow food and improve the outcomes for people and the soil and for our profitability. You spend a few days. I'll start again. You spend some time in Albuquerque and also start again.
Have another drink.
Yeah, I know. It's very early. So you spend some time in Florida now, and also in Zimbabwe. And where are you now? And how are you spending your time in regards to extending the holistic management movement and the hubs and generally the global impact?
Well, I'm engaged on that all the time. With regard to where I am, I'm in Florida right now, speaking to you, and Jody and I have moved over here from Albuquerque, and it's been a very good move. Certainly for my health, I'll be a lot healthier and around longer to make a nuisance of myself, I believe. And I can raise my eyes over the computer right now, and I'm looking on the mangroves in my boat. And when I finish talking to you, I'll go out fly fishing.
Great. Good news. That's great. Excellent. Allan, holistic management is about human decision-making. Where were you when the human decision-making holistic context jigsaw came together for you? Was it a particular occasion, or was it over some time? I'm really interested to know the point in which you realised it was human decision-making, and where were you if it was a light bulb moment?
Yeah, I think that's human decision-making is very much linked to the first edition of the book, because that's about when we got the pieces together and finally could guarantee success was in about 1984. At the time, I was a political exile in the Americas, and I was working at that time with about 2,000 fellow scientists that I was training, putting through a week of training over a 2-year period for the US government. And under that intense barrage of training and challenging what we were doing, an hour was spent every day in those sessions trying to find any flaws in the logic or the science of the holistic framework. And it was at that time that we finally broke through. Some of the criticisms helped, and that had built on the previous years of development of the grazing planning process, which was leading to erratic results, because that was my fault, as I described in the book.
Because you noticed that although you were improving the soil and the grazing, families were still struggling and not sticking together, and that's added to that next question. Well, what's causing this?
What caused what?
So I guess I know that in the book there's discussion about you were having some success biologically on the farms, you're having success on the financial side of things, but still families were still struggling with each other and conflict and some people were still divorcing and things like that. And so you realised there was something more to it than just fixing the grazing.
Oh yes, and when you say having success with the financial, put it this way: when I was getting ranches in 4 countries going extremely successfully, and then when I went into exile, results became very erratic. When I went back looking at them, I thought the fault was mine, because in some cases I'd left out social stuff. It could be as simple as a divorce wrecking the whole thing. Not that I could have prevented that. But in other cases, it was financial stuff. People had been lured into easy government loans for unwise irrigation projects, things like that, that had nothing to do with the grazing, but led to the bankruptcy of the farm. And so I realized from now on, I don't work with any farmer unless everything is brought into account. And once we started to do that, and then work out, well, how do you do that? That's when we finally broke through in about 84. Prior to 84, anybody practicing holistic management could have experienced erratic results. If they do now, it's because they've stopped practicing. Because when we put thousands of people through training, the 2,000 professional people, one of the exercises we did was to treat it as a hypothesis. Even though it's management and not a hypothesis, I got them to treat it as one, describe what the scientific method was, and then to work in syndicates or groups and try to theoretically cause it to fail. And on average, that took 4 hours and they would give up and just said, in the end, you cannot cause us to fail except by not doing it. And that's what we've experienced.
Yes. No, that's been our experience, I'd suggest. Today we have covered at the conference, there's been a vast array of how-tos and really looking at some the really practical ways of things people can do. The holistic decision-making process, how does it assist with taking action from information overload? So the holistic decision-making is based on your context and with your decision questions. So how does it actually assist with the information overload that some people can experience because there is so much information out there?
Well, it does more than it does assist, as you're saying it. I was going to say it does more than that because I feel it. I can remember when we did finally break through, making a comment to a fellow wildlife scientist who'd worked with me a lot in Africa, and we had often talked about the amount of information we had and never knew how to fit it into the management. So you had this enormous amount of information, but as you were managing daily, you didn't know what was appropriate, what wasn't, and it was really a haphazard game. Once we had the holistic management framework for our management, all right, automatically the information you needed slotted in. You found where it slotted in. It was a great relief. You didn't have to try and think of all this information and where do I use it. You now were making management decisions and could see what information you needed. And
that's great.
Yeah, that's a little bit like using the holistic management framework in the research orientation mode. So even now, any farmer practicing, if they're using it in the research orientation mode, they tend to find out we've got a gap in our knowledge in the management. This needs research.
Yes,
so
that's right.
It actually now gets research supporting the management. Instead of previously, we were trying to have the research run the management. In other words,
yes, that's true.
Yeah.
And I think also there's that opportunity to use the framework as also that sifting process. So you go to a field day, you pick up all this great information, all these options to actually solve the same problem you might have. And then you can actually evaluate those options towards your context. And it's a great way of actually sifting through all the noise, actually getting very clear about what it is that you truly want. And what I really love about the framework is that it actually is a living process. So something that you do, this 6 months, in this next 6 months, which is because it's actually perfectly right for your context and where you're heading right now, is, that's good. But in 6 months' time, it may not be right. Something else is going to be perfect because because the business has evolved and grown. And I think it's the only management process that actually evolves and grows and it is dynamic. Most management is a system and a structure it's just so structured that it doesn't have that flexibility and the movement available that the holistic context allows, because as we grow as people and the business grows and changes dimension, the context keeps changing as well and grows. And so that I think is the true value of the framework, and something that's quite unique in management.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to bring the consumer along on the ag journey, we've got, how are you seeing this working locally? And I know that our Australian hub has been working very hard with Tony Hill, and in regards to the land to market branding, and for the EOV, which is the EVO, which is the environmental verification. What else have you seen, or how would you like to talk to that, or what other activities have you seen globally about really trying to bring that consumer along with the ag sector in regards to making those linkages better?
Well, I don't know how to answer that. When you say bring the consumer along, the main thing is to get them engaged in truly regenerative agriculture. You see, you've said there are many management ways. I don't get the exact words you use, but what I find is there are libraries full of management books. There are whole management departments at universities, etc., etc. But if you peel the onion, like I did with tools, when developing the holistic framework, humans thought there were thousands of options. And I said, no, let's bring it down. We're a tool-using animal, and let's bring it down to the tools we actually use to change our environment, say, in agriculture. And, as you know, there's only two tools. There's technology or there's fire for 99.9% of human existence. Now, nobody knew that, strangely enough, until I drew attention to that. And then the only other tool we had over 1 million years was relatively recent. That was resting the environment or conservation. And then all you have available in reductionist management beyond that is to use technology to plant trees. Now, by thinking of the thousands of options as tools, we brought it down to almost no options, and except to use livestock, for instance, to reverse desertification or stabilize climate. And I was criticized for saying there were no other options, but there are no other options once you see it in that simplicity. Now take that to help your consumers, to management. We're told there's dozens of ways of managing. Yes, there are many management practices, and you can practice all of them, but peel the onion, keep peeling it down, and there are only two ways of managing available to humans today. Now, that again would shock everybody until you understand peeling it down. So the two ways you can manage today are reductionist management, which is universal to all tool-using animals, and we're a tool-using animal. And that is at the core of every single management practice of humans. So no matter what they're doing, it's reductionist. Even with the most sophisticated scientific teams, fully conscious that their policies or actions, will affect society, culture, economics. It's still, they reduce it to the problem being dealt with. So the other way is the holistic framework. So you've got two ways now. And the quicker we can get people to understand that, then they can truly be regenerative in agriculture. Because you said it yourself just now, a practice that's right today may not be right tomorrow. A practice that's right on one property may not be right on another. And you get a good one that's pushed a lot in Australia is building swales, just to use that as an example. Should you build swales or not? I have absolutely no idea. In non-brittle environments, with a stable and effective water cycle, if you're trying to push production further, it would pass the filtering and be in most people's holistic context. If you're building it in Africa or North Africa or Wales or in most parts of America, etc., where you've got a non-effective rainfall, etc., it's absolutely the wrong thing to do. So there's a perfectly good practice, a really good practice that's right to do in some cases, wrong in others. And so we've got to bear in mind that agriculture is a series of practices today, and the right ones can be selected. They'll float to the top when the management is holistic.
That's right. And when people are very clear about what it is they're trying to create. And that's where that's the holistic process, and the holistic context provides that for businesses. And so, yes, I think that's absolutely true. And there are just so many how-tos. And to actually be able to be clear, get clarity on those how-tos that you're going to actually implement is what holistic decision making actually delivers, which I think that's the exciting part about the process, amongst other things, obviously. It's interesting that the Savory Institute has developed over 40 hubs globally. How do you see the HM hubs developing, and how do they develop their depth of offering to support people in regenerative agriculture generally and holistic management practitioners? How do they do that? And I guess, again, they're all unique, which is terrific, and relevant to their own areas. But again, it's that connection with that regenerative ag movement. Have you got some examples that are happening globally, or, and we have the Australian example of the land to market and things like that. So
they're all locally led, locally managed. So you've got African hubs, Swedish hubs, Turkish hubs. They're all over the place. Several in America now, all different. And you said that yourself just now. They're unique. All right. So how they service the people around them, how the people collaborate, is up to them. It is essentially a way to get the leadership coming from ordinary people, because we've got a leaderless world floundering today, frankly, and it is impossible, if you understand system science and wicked problems, it's impossible for the leadership to come from any university, politician, agricultural organization, farmers organization, can only come from ordinary people. So these hubs are a way now, having failed with many other things that we tried, right? This is a way to get people in an area collaborating with one another as human beings. Now, some of them will come from institutions. We've got the first university-led hub in Michigan, as you may know. Some will come from government agencies, environmental organizations, farming organizations, but first and foremost, they're humans with families beginning to manage holistically. Each has to have some land base, and other than that, meet some requirements, and then we coordinate them and keep the quality of the materials, the training up to date, keep things developing and not sliding back. Because inevitably, when you have a new thing like holistic management is, and you teach somebody and they teach somebody else, it's the old thing of send reinforcements, we're going to advance, becomes send refreshments, we're going to advance. So we've got to do that, and we're doing that through the hub movement. Now, I'm thrilled because I see them already collaborating. In other words, I've been in Sweden while I'm there, they've been communicating with Argentina hub and solving a problem, and things like that. It's very exciting, the hub movement that's developing. Now, how do we hope it develops? We've got to develop till there are hundreds of hubs.
Yes.
Hundreds of hubs, because we've got 7 billion people to affect.
Yeah. So it's a big task.
If agriculture doesn't become regenerative, what hope has humanity? Because it is the most destructive, extractive industry ever in the history of mankind. So Australia has no option, if you're serious about your families, serious about your nation, but to get hubs all over Australia as fast as you can.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
Unless somebody has a better idea.
Yeah. No, that's good. So, yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, we've certainly got a lot of movement in Australia in regenerative ag space. There's no doubt about that. And various people are doing some extraordinary work. And it's about that collective activity now, bringing it all together and coming together. So that's good. With your wealth of experience and years of seeing holistic management in practice, what's the greatest hurdle in getting landowners to manage holistically, and what would be the best course of action to evoke behavioural change? Do you think?
The answer to that, I'd love it. I have. Yeah. We can laugh about it, but how do you get people to genuinely want to help themselves? I don't know. People will go broke, leave the farm, break their families because they're too damn lazy to learn something new, or they try to pick up information in the bar, or goodness knows, I get frantic trying to help people who don't want to help themselves. So I don't have an answer to that.
That's right. And I think there is a point where people have got to be ready to hear the information. There's you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And it's about getting ready. It's about people encouraging them, creating the right environment for people to be ready to hear the information. It's planting a lot of seeds, and it's fertilizing.
Let me give you an example. Sure. I thought when we had that university study in America by Deb Steiner, it's mentioned in the book, yes. Early practitioners who came to me in America for training, she and her co-workers studied what happened to them, and they averaged 300% more profit. Now, over the time period of that study, 600,000 farm families went bankrupt, and suicide was the leading cause of death. So I thought a research paper showing that the early practitioners changing their management to holistic, averaging 300% in those same markets, would go somewhere. It's never cited. It's never, ever cited by the critics. And the farmers followed a handful of academic critics who've never even studied our work. So how do you explain that? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is a lifelong question, and I think it's up to all of us just to keep plugging away and keep planting those seeds. And because change agents aren't ever around when the change happens, so it's a long game, that is for sure. Allan, thank you for joining us. Do you have some closing remarks about, I guess, the future and how you'd like to see it play out, and your wish for regenerative agriculture and holistic management?
Well, having said agriculture is the most destructive industry we've ever had, which it truly is, all right, and I don't want to bore you with the figures that show that, we've got to get regenerative agriculture going for our families, the future. Organic, sustainable, any of these other practices we know are not if the management is reductionist. If the management is holistic, the best practices will float to the top. So how would you define regenerative agriculture? That's a difficult question, and I was speaking about it the other night. I would define it as agriculture that's based on the biological sciences where the management is holistic, all right? Because you can't go much further than that without saying individual practices when they have to be decided in each farm and case. So if you go much further than that, you're trying to answer how long is a piece of string without having the string with you. Okay. Now, at the moment, agriculture is based on chemistry and marketing of technology, mainstream agriculture. So we've got to get away from that. But if we as farmers and concerned citizens argue practices, the change will take another 100 years if you're lucky. And I think we're running out of time. So what could we do as farmers and family people? What we have to do is talk about one thing that nobody can argue. In other words, if I argue for an agricultural practice, somebody will argue for another. In fact, we've got people in agricultural organizations vying for funds, competing with each other, vying for validity of their idea, and then you've got the mainstream crowd. So you've got to stop this argument. Now, if we all say management needs to be holistic and not reductionist, there isn't a sane human who can argue for management to be reductionist. Now, the moment management is holistic and we base agriculture on the biological sciences, the best practices will come to the top. And there'll be the permaculture practices, the organic practices, and some good practices from mainstream agriculture will maybe emerge from the top. So that's my hope, is that we can set that up, do it through the hub movement as the most rapid way of doing it. I spoke at a dinner meeting with the new hub in New Hampshire last week, and that should be on YouTube within a day or two. And of course, we'll spread that, and people can read more what I'm saying here and how to bring it about. Each one of us, what we can do individually to bring this about for the sake of our families, our friends, our nation, etc. And so I'd just like to encourage all of you to get involved in that, and particularly to get the hub movement going in Australia, because the size of Australia, you're about the size of America, and already there's half a dozen or more hubs here, and we've only got one so far in the whole of Australia. You guys, if you're serious about your families, you'll get moving, and we'll get regenerative agriculture truly going. It's a practice and a name I first heard from Bob Rodale when he was alive, and he was the first man to talk of regenerative agriculture, and I always like to credit Bob with that, and it's a good way to end.
Thank you, Allan, very much for your time. It's been a terrific opportunity and pleasure talking with you, as always, and we wish you every success and all the best in the future and good health. We thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. I wish I was with you. Good luck to you all.